if you're not building relationships with the town officials, with the property owners, that you're going to have to go back. And remember this too, Tim. Property owners have a tremendous amount of power. They don't realize it, and they're probably not going to be seeing this, but at the end of the day, you're always going back to the property owner for something. Build the relationship, get to know them, sit at their table, eat pie with them, sit in their conference room, and that's, you do those things, it's not a guarantee, but you're going to be way ahead of the competition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, energy as real estate. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify so that others can find this content. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's great to have Joe Tassone, the co-founder of onCORE, Origination, and ABOVEgrid, on the show today. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Jim, thank you very much. Honored to be with you today.
I have to give a shout out to Jim Spano. All things lead back to Jim Spano. So thank you, Jim, for all the introductions you've made over the years. But Joe, you have a unique angle on solar development, which is it's fundamental and it's a no-brainer in some ways, but I love the message. So give our listeners a little background on yourself. How did you get into real estate and then clean energy?
Sure, Tim. So I look at myself and my partners. We're really developers at the end of the day, and my career spans about over 25 years. I started doing site acquisition and project management and wireless telecom back in the mid 90s, when it was sort of the PCS revolution, where all the cellular carriers started coming heavy into the market, and traveled all over the country, finding land and buildings to put towers and antennas on, and really learned the really trade of development and real estate and acquisition, and doing probably over, I coined 5,000 projects in my career, indirectly, directly, when I owned companies, and really learning how to deal with people and negotiate deals, and really bringing deals through from fruition, from inception into reality. And telecom has a lot of synergies in what we do, almost identical synergies, except one thing, you're building a tower where you don't want to have to deal with the utilities as much, and I would say that's the main difference. And through my career, working for another company, I started a career in 1998. I worked for SBA Communications. I was there 7 years, rose through the ranks as just a what we called a site property specialist, all the way to director level of tower development. SBA, I think, is the 7th or 8th largest REIT in the world now, with like over 50,000 assets. And in 2005, I was just kind of itching to go out on my own and do something, and started a company, HPC, with a partner, with really just used our savings and started doing consulting and permitting and project management for Nextel at the time. And within 3 or 4 years, we were number 342 on the Inc. 5000. We had about 20 employees. We were doing projects, turnkey projects, where companies would hire us, like Metro PCS, to go out and do turnkey. So they would say, hey, here's a bunch of projects, go out and get them cited for us, permitted, do the engineering, the title, environmentals, and we subbed that all out. And then we got into construction. We decided in 2011 to take on some debt and hire people and buy trucks and so on. And that was sort of the start of our downfall, in the sense where we were a no debt company. And now we started doing all these projects and we're up to 75 people. In 2015, we had a banner year, like we were the national provider, consultant for some of a couple big companies that you would know the names of. And then the industry, it was it kind of like solar, and it's really a roller coaster. So it's really controlled by the budgets. In 2016, our sales went down. I had a couple of incidents happen in the company, some divisions between people, and we just ended up burning through cash, and ended up shutting it down in 2017. It was a very harrowing experience. Never would want to go through that again. And decided the same week of that going down to start a business. And I had a relationship with a big solar developer and said, hey, we can go out and do real estate for you and acquisition for you and find land up in the Northeast in Massachusetts. Didn't really know anything about solar. Didn't even know you need three-phase power, but just knew how to build relationships and in order to get projects. And going into this, and I spoke about this on other podcasts, is that I realized that the industry, it's a wonderful industry, but it is a little bit young in the sense of when I say, it hasn't been around for 50 years. So I saw a lot of things that could be done better. And one of the things is on the development end. And I'll stop there now. It's kind of my background and,
cool. Yeah. Well, I like to say that, we energy professionals, we work with three things. We work with people, technology, and sustainability. And it's a wonderful mix when it works well. We are now at a crucial time in human history. It's a very exciting time. I feel very blessed to be alive today. The challenges are many, but the opportunities are enormous. And we have the technology now to completely green the grid, to electrify transportation, to electrify and clean industrial heat. And that's what we're all about here at the Clean Power Hour, speeding the energy transition. So what is it about solar development, though, that you love? And, you and I have been in the solar industry about the same time. I got in full time in 2016. I was able to hit the ground running because I, have been learning about it since I was a kid, and I have a lifelong passion for sustainability, but it's got some unique angles. We're faced with challenges like supply chain, which, I never said that expression so much than in 2021 and 2022. It's just these things happen, right? So anyway, tell us about onCORE and ABOVEgrid. I'm a little confused, honestly, because ABOVEgrid is a developer and onCORE is a originator. And so how do those two companies overlap, and what is the difference?
Sure. ABOVEgrid is, we're mainly a national developer of large scale solar projects that we develop and usually exit out at an NTP, taking some of the risk on. And onCORE Origination is actually my first company. Started as a Sencore, and then we just rebranded to onCORE. And we really focus more in the battery storage space, in doing mainly origination and consulting on that end. But it all goes into really the foundation of what I believe and what our visions are, is really, it comes down to, real estate and development. And one of the things that I see in this business is, when I first got into it, it's a very transactional business. Companies would take a product. Companies wouldn't even talk to you, buyers, IPPs, so have you, wouldn't even speak to you unless you had a project fully baked in NTP, And I remember I said this to my partners at the time, it was going back 3-4 years ago. I said, it's going to happen where companies are going to be coming in and saying, hey, we just need projects. We'll start funding you early stage. But that's how it was in the tower development game. I mean, if you were good at what you did, there's companies that would come in and take all the risk, and they just look for you to provide projects for them. And I remember my partner, oh no, it'll never happen. This business is really set up, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but I've never seen it. I mean, you think about it, the everything is done, MIPAs and you go to these conferences, right? And it's all these, talking, it's like 10 people there. Jim, is one about capital, need capital in this. And when I was in telecom, and I'm not saying there's a lot of things wrong with that industry, I could spend a whole hour on it, but you never talked about money. Money was just, it was there. Public companies, 5 guys, girls met in the back room, and never was on a conference where you talk. You never heard anyone talk about financing and capital. And right now there's enough capital in this business, but what we don't have is enough good projects coming in. And what our passion is, and this goes back to the real estate game, is we're in the real estate business, right? We're in, you can have supply chain, right? Again, I hear your sentiments. I echo that never said that word so many times in the last 18 months. You have policy, you have capital, okay? Most of these things are the same for anybody. If you're trying to get a project interconnected in New York, you have the same policies that, capital constraints or no capital constraints. But what differentiates us is in good companies is are you able to build a connection with a property owner? Are you able to get that person to sign on a dotted line? And are you able to vet good real estate? That's the key. If you don't have that, you have nothing. You could have $1 billion and you could have 3,000 batteries in a warehouse. But if you can't do that fundamental thing, you will fail in this business. And you're going to see a lot of companies, just like I saw in telecom, come in with a lot of money. They're going to blitzkrieg through areas. They're not going to read the tea leaves. They're going to get out there. They're not going to know how to build relationships. They're going to overpay, and they're going to be out of business. They're going to really be struggling along. And we've seen that happen with some companies will not name that's done that in the last few years. So that is a broad answer to your question, but I think really the crux of what we do.
So our industry is maturing. As you pointed out, we're not really a 50-year-old industry, even though the technology is 70 years old now. Solar took off in the US in 2010. And so we're 12, 13 years into that journey. It's great that the technology is relatively mature, right? There's not a lot of technology risk in solar anymore. There's a lot of real estate risk. You just don't know when you're developing any particular parcel, what might pop up. Is there going to be NIMBYism? Are you going to have environmental challenges? Is the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, going to take issue? Here in the Midwest, we're mostly taking what is corn and beans, prime farm ground, and converting it to wind and solar. And it's not only prime farm ground, but we're swimming in prime farm ground. And I see nothing wrong with taking land out of rotation from heavy industrial, heavy chemical input, heavy carbon footprint, farming to solar, which is going to be much lighter on the land, good for reducing runoff, good for reducing the fertilization problem, right? We're dumping fertilizer into the Mississippi, and then that goes to the Gulf of Mexico and creates a dead zone. There's a lot of goods, and it's good for landowners. Landowners can triple their income by leasing their land to developers. The neighbors are another matter, and we have to become more sophisticated about working with neighbors and stakeholders, because people don't understand what solar is, and they just see change and they go, don't like it. But there's also a confluence of events happening, Joe, in the heartland here, and that is that there's 60,000 miles of CO2 pipelines that are planned and being developed. These are a carrot for the oil industry, and they're going to pipe this CO2 to where I live in central Illinois and put it down in the ground and pray to God that it stays there. And they have no idea, technically, even if that is true. They're just going to do this. But this is causing fatigue on landowners and neighbors, especially, and on AHJs. So what do you have to say to developers about becoming more sophisticated? As Mike Casey at TigerCom likes to say, we need to put on our big boy pants and really start behaving like a sizable industry. There's 250,000 people in solar alone now. That doesn't measure batteries and wind. So we're becoming a major industry. But what do you have to say about maturation?
It's a lot to unpack right there. And I believe that you're always going to have those challenges, right? I've actually worked Iowa, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, upstate New York, very rural areas. I mean, farmers have assaulted the earth, human beings, but also I've yet to meet a farmer that just doesn't complain on how difficult it is to make money. We do have a lot of farmland, and fortunately or unfortunately, that's where a lot of these projects you could put them, right? I mean, I do work in Con Ed. There's hardly any solar in Con Ed because you just don't have the land and it's too pricey. All the projects in upstate New York are in what, mostly rural communities, suburban rural communities. So you're going to have the NIMBYism. You're not going to get away from that. I mean, developing towers. I mean, I could bore you with anecdotes of 3 years, litigations, fights, but the difference between the telecom industry is they have the Telecom Act. They have to be in, a spot. It's very hard to deny a tower if you do your homework. But your main question is, it all goes back to planning and having a plan up front and doing the due diligence. I mean, one of our mantras at onCORE is really sprint in the beginning and not at the end. And what I see happens in development, companies come in, they have a lot of money. They don't want to spend money up front. They don't want to, when the projects start to get de-risked, I've witnessed people writing checks at the table at closing for 50 grand to resolve issues that could have been resolved on a simple title curative action 14 months prior. But you ask a company, and I saw this in telecom, hey, why don't you have an attorney look at this? It's going to a couple $1,000. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. That's too much money. And but now that money's starting to come in, people are starting to get smarter. So step one is have a plan, have the company invest in something. It's not a lot of money, but do the due diligence. I mean, one of the things we do, we also do some audit projects where company wants to come in, buy a portfolio, and we'll start looking at the due diligence and you'd be surprised the stuff that people throw against the wall to see what sticks. I mean, we've looked at projects where, they're getting to the second stage of a company trying to purchase these. And we would say, what do you guys do? They don't even have this. This is not even, they don't have the right parcel on the lease, and the memorandum's not recorded, and you can't zone this here. And you just waste a lot of time and energy, and more money and time is wasted up front. So do the work up front. Hire the right people to do the work up front and invest in that and have a plan. That's number one. Number two, as far as the communities, I don't know. I think it's just a uniqueness. I mean, there is a lot of politics surrounding renewables. We're in areas where we thought it was going to be a no-brainer, and the politics, they don't believe in solar. They don't believe in any of this. They watch a certain news channel and they just hate it, and it's just sunk in their mind. So you're up against that, and sometimes you're just not going to win. And the third thing is, pick the right sites. Sometimes you can, you're just lucky where you have a lot of screening involved, and sometimes you pick the best site in the world, and just one neighbor's causing, I've had neighbors put together coalitions and fight you tooth and nail. And the last thing I will say in answering your question is develop the relationship with the stakeholders. That's one of our core values. I mean, I've done a lot of term LOIs, term sheets, and I say Massachusetts. I remember going out there with my customer, and the property owner, whether it's a big real estate developer or a farmer, would say, hey, I signed a couple of LOIs 5 years ago. You're the first person that showed up at my property. I've never met these people before. If you're not building relationships with the town officials, with the property owners, that you're going to have to go back and remember this too, Tim. Property owners have a tremendous amount of power. They don't realize it, and they're probably not going to be seeing this, but at the end of the day, you're always going back to the property owner for something. Build the relationship, get to know them, sit at their table, eat pie with them, sit in their conference room, and that's, you do those things. It's not a guarantee, but you're going to be way ahead of the competition.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clean Power Hour or viewing it on YouTube. We do have a great YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go to cleanpower.group and hit that YouTube icon and subscribe to our channel. Of course, you can find all of our content on your favorite audio platform as well. So please give us a rating and review. Back to the show. Yeah, I like that a lot. I do think that developers can be a little cavalier, and, it's a spectrum. We have some very good clean energy companies. Apex stands out on the constituent relations side. They build websites for all of their projects pre-construction, and they have ways for constituents to sign up for notifications. And, that kind of sophistication is necessary. I think we have to be we have to over communicate with stakeholders, whether they're the landowner or the neighbor or the zoning board of appeals. And because it's hard for these lay people to understand what we're up to. They just see a wall of change. And the reality is, as you and I know, only a fraction of these projects that are getting permitted are going to get developed, first and foremost. And it's very hard for people to understand this. All the hoops, all the checks, all the boxes that have to get checked during the course of project development, it is dizzying, and it's a multi-year process. But there's no reason why landowners and neighbors can't understand what's coming down the pike. And ultimately, I think we have to reframe solar development as keeping people on the land. Rural communities in the United States are struggling for a whole variety of reasons. In California, they're struggling because of the drought. Here in the Midwest, the drought is also starting to come. The Mississippi is at an all-time low, and a huge amount of our food goes down the Mississippi. Not right now, it's not. But I think we just have to bring the tools to bear. There's a certain phenomenon that I witness, and that is that developers think that they can fly under the radar, and they don't want to be noticed per se. And I think that's a mistake, because one way or another, people are going to find out about what's going on. And you don't want people to find out at the 11th hour, actually, when you're at a critical juncture trying to get that special use permit. You don't want that week before to be the first time that a neighbor heard about a project. You really do not. And so I think we need to come together and develop a more sophisticated playbook. That's why I'm hosting a series on, for example, NIMBYism and how developers can fight that. It's a totally unnecessary phenomenon. And I want to circle back to this theme, though, of it is good for rural communities. It's good for their income. It's good for their tax base, and it's good for the land. That's one of the things that I love about being a solar developer is the vast majority of us truly care about the earth. We want a more sustainable future. We want humanity to live lighter on the land. And it's a virtuous circle, right? Because right now, climate change is about to kick our butts. And we are dependent on the environment, not vice versa. The earth is going to be fine, I like to say. Mm-hmm. It was here long before us. It'll be here long after us. So we're just trying to eke out a better life for the next 1,000 or 2,000 years. And it's a question mark right now, whether or not we can have the good life, Joe. But what are your thoughts about, I guess, NIMBYism in particular? You know, what do you see as an opportunity for developers? And then let's talk about battery storage, because I've never had a battery developer on the show. We've done some battery and solar and battery companies like Catalyze, but I'd love to geek out a little bit on that particular niche.
All right, no, great. Okay, so NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Being literally have gone to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of planning board, zoning board meetings all over the country, some of them in the most rural areas in America, and some of them in the heart of Westchester County outside of New York, where people will literally hire $500 attorneys to fight you. I've been threatened physically, spit at, literally, people screaming and yelling at me, crying, zoning a tower. One thing about solar is you could pretty much hide it for the most part, with screening, 150-foot tower, you can't. And
No, you can't.
Going through litigation and deposition, been very successful. So you're not going to change NIMBYism, okay? No matter, being even on the planning board in my town a decade ago, no matter what you do, there is going to be the vocal minority that shows up. I mean, you could mitigate that, but there's no way of getting around it. You could have the greatest thing in the world, and people are going to show up because they've looked at the same beautiful farmland or woods for 100 years, and they don't want, as we speak right now, there's two houses being built right behind me, literally as we speak. Beautiful woods, lived here for 15 years. There were people upset that there's two houses going in. No one went to the town. There's nothing they can do. But when you live next to a farm or whatever, there's a good chance that someday that may be developed. Now, I always argue that solar is the most innocuous thing you could put on that land. It doesn't affect, school districts. There's no water to it. It actually could help with the grid, especially putting storage with it. There's no, all the other things and services you need. And I've actually seen some towns, by one town in particular, by me in upstate New York, they actually said off the record, hey, we hate solar, but you know what? Every time a 30-acre solar, that's 100 less houses that comes into our community, which we can't stop. So they're happy about that. Mm-hmm. Really, so how do you mitigate this, right? Now, it depends if you're doing a 1,000-acre utility scale project versus a 1 megawatt project, right? There's skill there. If you're doing a 1 megawatt project, you just go in, you do it. There's outreach. There's not a lot of outreach involved, but you pick the right site. You work with the town as much as you can. Don't be a stranger, and you hire the right. I found hiring the right council who's connected with the town, and that's not going to really help with the NIMBYism, but at least it'll help you with the politics of the town and let the town know that, hey, we want to work with you and we're trying to follow the law, and just try to be as upfront as you can with the people. And I mean, if you have people that show up, and the other thing too that companies don't do enough of, and this goes to your having a plan, is if you have a town with my town, 20-something thousand people, whatever project comes in front of the town, major project, there's going to be 20 or 30 people showing up against the project. 99% of the town doesn't care, but there's probably 1,000 people that want it. Get to those 1,000 people and have people come to the town in support of your project, because it really comes down to, at the end of the day, it comes down to the 5, 7, 9 people sitting behind the on the dais who's making the decisions, and those are the people that you have to convince. And if you have a good town and a good chairperson that wants to see this project and is fair, you're gonna win. But I found if you can get people to come to the meeting who are in support, friends, neighbors, get your people, do reach out. And I have a really good anecdote about that on the tower in a minute, but those are the things that I see. But you're not going to stop NIMBYism. I mean, it's just, from my point of view, you're going to have people come and scream and yell no matter what you do.
I think it's about creating a better balance that's in the favor of the developers. I agree that there will be people, no matter what, who are going to oppose any change, but it's, can you bring more stakeholders to the table who support a project? And we're getting pushback, not just from neighbors, but from AHJs on small projects here in the Midwest. These are 30-acre projects. And it boils down to things like, well, we don't want to take any more farmland out of rotation. And, my county alone has 640,000 acres. We only need a tiny percent. We need 1 to 2% of the landscape. 6% is already roads and buildings in the US. 40% of our land is used in some way for raising livestock. So we're just swimming in real estate. But let's talk about battery development. Tell us a little bit about, how you guys separate or differentiate yourselves. What is unique about onCORE, and who are your customers? You don't have to get into the specifics, but generally, what is your value proposition?
Sure. Happy to speak about that. Well, onCORE, now onCORE, I would say that's a specialty of what we do. And for one, we got into working for a big developer. Our clients are IPPs and larger developers. And we like battery because I want to say it's easier in the sense because you're not taking up 30, 40, 50, 100 acres, right? A lot of most battery storage programs, you're at there's even utility scale battery, you're looking at maybe a 10 to 20 acre, at the 10 acres at the tops, actually. So you're leasing a footprint of maybe 5,000 to 10,000 square feet. So it's a little bit more palatable, a little easier to do. You're not dealing with, major wetland mitigations or the other things that come up when you're doing large scale development. You're also going a lot more in industrial, manufacturing, commercial zones. So even if, even some of the most toughest towns in like lower New York, they're pretty acceptable for it because it's already industrial. It's, there's questions that come up. So we like doing it. And we also believe it's the future. I mean, solar is not going anywhere, don't get me wrong, but front of the meter battery now, like they have a great program in New York. And now with the ITC kicking in, where you went from zero value for standalone, zero credits for standalone now to 30%. I mean, that's a big needle mover, right? So you're going to see this, and the grid, and I'm a layman when it comes to the technology, so don't ask me how all this works, but the simple explanation is you're charging at off-peak times, and you're putting in electricity into the grid at peak times. And there's a lot of demand mitigation too during the especially in areas like Con Ed. So the grid is constricted, as we know, and there's a lot more controls. I mean, the companies now we're seeing in this space are, they're software companies, and you have other areas like New York's got a pretty prolific program down in the Metro New York area, but New Jersey right across the border. You have Connecticut, you have Los Angeles, you have all these other areas now where they're going to be needing. They don't have a choice but to do it in front of the meter storage programs, because you have this influx of EV. For instance, New York mandated last year, I believe, where within 5 to 10 years, they want all school buses to be electric. So now you're talking of putting in scores of, 200 to 400 kilowatt EV chargers, in one bus yard. The grid can't handle that. Couldn't even begin to handle that. So how do you do it? So storage is really at the forefront. We're going to see more of it. We like doing it because we're very good at originating good projects, vetting them, building relations with landowners. It could be a very good lucrative proposition for property owners. And we just believe in the future. And our value proposition is really, if you go to our webpage, it really talks about, building relationships with stakeholders. That is at the core of what we do. Integrity, honesty. And one thing I do want to circle back with you. You mentioned about how do you work with NIMBYism or towns. I mean, the first and foremost thing is we all want to win, right? We all want to make things and produce things, but number one, you have to be honest. You have to set expectations very upfront. There's most companies I found in this business are good, and they're like that. But there are companies that come along and they dupe landowners. That's all you need to do. You start to, Tim, in these communities, Farmer Joe knows everybody, goes back 5 generations. So you start to go in there and sing, sell someone a song or say, we're going to do this for you, we're going to do that. You don't, that's integrity. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, you're already off to the, you're not going to win. It's a bad start. So be real, set expectations. When we go in to meet with a property owner, we're very upfront. Hey, man, this is a 50-50 deal. Don't go out spending your money. We have a lot of hurdles to jump through. Our customers are going to take care of everything for you. But at the end of the day, these are the expectations. It may or may not happen. We feel good about it on the pre-due diligence we've done, but we're dealing with the utility, we're dealing with an AHJ, and also explain to them that there's a lot of hurry up and wait. So in the beginning, when you're trying to get contracts signed, there's going to be a lot of communication, but then you might not hear a lot for 4 or 5 months because we're waiting for an impact study to come back. So setting the expectations up front and then communicating them, try to put things in writing and really build that relationship. I mean, you do that, that is 51% of the battle right there.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that we're going to need a lot more grid power, right? We are going to double or triple the grid when we electrify transportation. This is a major challenge, but it's a great opportunity. Batteries are a wonderful resource for this. And, there's now credible stories about rewiring the grid also, just installing updated conductor technology, the wires that move the power around have gotten a lot better. And so you can use the existing infrastructure, the existing tower network, and put new technology onto those towers and run a lot more juice. We're going to need 6 terawatts of storage. I had Paul Charles, the CEO of American Battery Factory, on the show. That show hasn't dropped yet, but wonderful lithium iron phosphate battery cell manufacturer, propping up a mega factory in Tucson, Arizona now. So it'll be American-made lithium-ion batteries. We dearly need this, right? Because China makes 70+% of all the lithium-ion right now, all the battery cells, and that's just no good. We need to do this at home. So we're going to need a lot of batteries. I would love to hear from more battery developers. So if you're a battery storage developer, reach out to me. I have a series of manufacturers who've already been on the show and more to come. And it's easy to get the manufacturers, but it's not easy to get developers to talk about their business. Why is that, Joe, that developers are so secretive?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe they just want to keep their behind the radar, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I think the more there's a lot of competition out there, but I believe that there's enough to go around. When I was go back to wireless telecom, you had like the 5 major carriers, Verizon, Sprint. And so everyone was sort of chasing that all the time, and you felt it's like a very captive audience. Here, there's a lot of things going around, and there's different niches. You talk to some companies, they I'll never go to that state, and then you look at another company that just sold 20 projects in state X, right? And I believe so. I don't know why they don't want to be on your show, but I also I'm just looking at predictions, what I think is going to happen. And again, this is just me. I've been right, I think, more times than I've been wrong since I've been in this industry. So I hope I'm not coming across arrogant or condescending. But you're going to see now with these changes with the IRA Act, and there's some a lot of reaction toward that. It's going to take a while for all the smoke to clear, and there's the whole prevailing wage a requirement to get the 30%. You're going to see that with the influx of capital coming in, even with interest rates going up, people always figure it out. One of the things I like about this industry, and it was the same for telecom, it doesn't really, I don't want to say it's recession proof in the sense, but there's so many other drivers in place. Like I remember in telecom, my best years were in like that 08, 09, 07 era, where everyone else, all other real estate was failing. So you're going to start to see a lot more money coming in. But you're also going to see companies now. This business is very, like, I look at the whole EPC, right? EPC. Oh, you need an EPC, you need an EPC, okay. And now I know I'm probably going to offend some people here, but you're really, at the end of the day, okay, I'm not talking about complicated rooftop projects, but you're putting erector sets with wood panels with glass on them, or not wood, you're putting them on a farm, okay. That is from, as far as construction goes, I'm not saying it's easy, but you're not building a building in Manhattan, you're not building a spaceship. And we put all this, like, you're going to start seeing companies saying, hey, we're going to get 10 guys in a truck to do this. Yeah, we got to guarantee production and all that other stuff. Okay, that's going to be there. At the end of the day, these projects, they get built and they're there for 50 years, 40 years. So you're going to start to see people taking more calculated risks, because they're going to have to. You can't sit around. If you're sitting around waiting to buy projects right now, you're going to be paying a king's ransom for them, or you're just going to lose. So with that, it's going to come companies coming in, and they're not going to be diligent, and they're going to spend a lot of money on due diligence, locking up a bunch of land, and you're going to have a 90% is going to fail. So I think you're going to start to see that more aggressiveness, and really relying on developer. The C&I space right now. Remember, community solar is, it was just starting out when I was getting in 17. It was when New York went from a net metering program, behind the meter, still going to be there, but it's not going to be as prolific. I mean, you could put think about what a 5 megawatt, 20-hour battery does versus going to, 17 commercial owners on the street and saying, we're behind the meter, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's complicated. It's harder to sell. It's harder to understand. So I think you see the C&I space will always be there, but it's not going to be as prolific as these other things, these DG programs. And then you have utility scale. Utility scale seems like the cure all, right? Hey, we're gonna put a 300 meg solar project. Good luck. Yeah, out west you can do it. In New York, they're struggling with it. It takes a long time. It will get there, but it's not the fix that's needed in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's just from a guy that doesn't, was on the ground floor, that doesn't sit in the ivory tower. But that's just what I see. And it's an exciting time. I agree with you.
Very exciting time. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Please check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. Especially a review is very helpful. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You just click that YouTube icon and subscribe there. I want to thank Joe Tassone of ABOVEgrid and onCORE Origination for coming on the show. Joe, how can our listeners reach you?
Sure. Go to our website, onCORE Orig. onCORE is oncoreorig.com. I also write a weekly blog. I got to plug that in. It's Monday's Motivation, and it's on Substack. So that'll just leave it there. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Joseph Tassone Jr., I believe, is my LinkedIn handle. And Tim, I just want to thank you. I love your show. I love what you're doing. I know you're out there every day fighting the fight and doing great things in our industry. And it's a pleasure, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Let's grow solar and storage.